recorded only by patrons and rebroadcasted from a clandestine location. Mr. Chris returns in the all-new Mr. Chris Show Underground. Once again, bringing to light what the dark powers keep hidden. And now, Mr. Chris.
Is everything you see and hear in the media, is it factual? Is it just opinionated? Or is it possibly scripted? Are there secret organizations, puppet masters, if you will, pulling the strings of their puppets in various areas of society, government, actors, other people with influence, even educators? Is this even possible? Furthermore, is it even conceivable that a person or persons from another time, another reality, could interact with us and also influence us in the future? The guest who I have returning on the show has spoken about these things before, and he's going to tell us even more. And that's when we get back right here on the Mr. Chris Show Underground.
The views expressed on the Mr. Chris Show are not necessarily those of Mr. Chris, his guests, sponsors, advertisers, or broadcast providers. The content provided by the Mr. Chris Show is intended solely for the purpose of entertainment. Reference to any persons, places, objects, or ideas is strictly coincidental. Everything presented herein is exclusive copyright of the Mr. Chris Show.
Well, as promised, we have Estas K. Brown with us again. Mr. Brown, are you on the line?
Good evening, Mr. Chris.
Oh,
I'm
good evening.
online.
Good evening to, I should actually say good morning where I am, but anyway, we'll go with good evening. That sounds fine. The last time we spoke, and I know that your situation is very similar to mine, so if we lose connection at some point, we lose connection if either of us has to go. That's the way it is. But let me just refresh your memory. Last time we were speaking about a variety of topics, but we left off with this Moderna Corporation, and you mentioned the name that I haven't heard in a long time, and that would be John Titor, the time traveler, or I should say the person who people say is the time traveler. I don't have any direct proof. Well, actually, there is something, but I don't want to talk about it now. So let's pick it up from there. And what did you mean about all that?
Well, Mr. Chris, specifically the Moderna Corporation is a recently founded corporation. It just went on its initial public offering in the New York Stock Exchange, I believe sometime late 2017. And that is one of the corporations that Mr. Bill Gates has decided to invest a large amount of his substantial savings. But the question is why? Who or what is this Moderna Corporation?
Right. I've heard it's tied to the vaccines, or helping the world through vaccines. Is that right?
Correct. It is a fledgling corporation that has decided to invest in modern vaccinations. And typically, a vaccine, when it is developed, is is just a weakened form of the actual virus that just so happens to be weak when it is injected into the human body, that the human body's immune system can react, build antibodies, and easily defeat the virus.
Right. So this is an altruistic corporation. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. And the sole reason for Mr. Bill Gates investing so heavily into this corporation, I believe he might own 10 to 20% of this company's stocks. And this is, again, prior to the corporation heading into its initial public offering. This company focuses on a virus's gene editing capabilities. Gene editing is quite an advanced technology that, for all intents and purposes, has not been tested in human bodies. So far, it's only been tested in a laboratory environment. I'm not quite sure if it's even been tested on animals, although I would not be surprised if they have been doing so in some clandestine manner.
Well, so how does this tie into John Titor then? I mean, this sounds like a good upfront corporation that's looking for the betterment of people all around the world.
One thing I do want to clarify, at least in the world of the Illuminati, there is a scientific understanding that time travel does indeed exist. However, the John Titor story, it could be that some future time traveler traveled back in time to do what he claimed to do. Not necessarily a project funded by any future Illuminati. It just seems to be a story that's out there. It's a story that I have researched over the years that I find to be rather interesting because of claims that he made back when he first appeared on the anonymous blog channel, online blog channel.
Okay, that was AHN or something like that.
Back in I believe it was the year 2000. I believe was when he made his appearance on these anonymous blog boards. Yes, it was an anonymous blog board called 4chan.com.
Okay.
He established his presence there, making some statements in the beginning, hoping for people to start chiming in with their questions, but it did take people a little bit of time to build enough confidence in John Titor to believe that he was a time traveler from the future.
Well, you know, I've always been skeptical, but there's a gentleman that I had on the show some years back, and maybe in the next segment I can look it up and play it for you, but he was corroborating a lot of the same similar kind of ideas of this gentleman, and I think he talked about the parallel universe theory. Are you familiar with that? Hello? We got a little digital breakup.
His predictions.
Okay. Now we're back.
That in the United States, just before, that science would actually discover or confirm the possibility of a multiple worlds theory, essentially referring to an infinite number of universes where you can exist an infinite number of times within those multiple universes, effectively consisting of what John Teeter referred to as a superverse. Each alternate timeline being probability generated.
Okay. So that means that, unlike the sci-fis that were very popular in the past, where, well, let's take Back to the Future, for instance, that you basically can't go back and affect your own self because there's a split and you're never going back to the same universe. Is that kind of the gist of this?
Not necessarily. At least modern science, in the current sense, scientists do not believe that time travel is possible because it violates one of the causality rules. What essentially does that mean? We go back to what's been described as a grandfather paradox.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot travel back time and kill your father before you were born, because in that erases your existence. There are physical laws that prohibit time travel in order to avoid that type of situation. Now, what the multiple worlds theory posits is that there is every possible combination, past and future, that is possible. So, in essence, if you travel back in time, you don't arrive back in the same universe that you left. You now travel back into the past, but you end up in an alternate universe that is very similar to the one that you came from, but it's not necessarily exact. When you travel back in time into this alternate universe, you may exist in that particular universe, or if you travel back far enough in time, you may meet your father, essentially kill him, but you only kill him within that universe. The universe that you left, your father still exists in that one because, again, there are an infinite number of yous that can exist in an infinite number of universes. So in theory, being able to travel back in time or in the future into these alternate universes, you can never really go back to the universe that you precisely left.
Mm-hmm. So now getting back to this Moderna Corporation and John Teeter, so how does this actually go together? Did he predict something?
He did not make any specific statement with respect to any one person about a possible future. He did mention that throughout the Civil War that the United States would be experiencing, and mind you, we're talking about a second Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
He indicated that he knew of Bill Gates' possible future, although he wouldn't disclose what precisely. He said something would end up happening with respect to Bill Gates, but that's as far as where he left it. Now, the fact that he mentioned one specific name for a possible future, or in our timeline, a possible future, in his timeline, it was an actual past event. What I find rather interesting now is that what we are seeing with the instantiation of this one world government, or at least with the attempt to instantiate this one world government with a one world currency, I find it rather interesting that Bill Gates is in the news quite a bit, specifically with his financial investment into this Moderna corporation to develop a vaccine to combat this pandemic. The timing of it, to me, is what seems suspect, and the fact that he is appearing in mainstream media quite so often is what I find rather interesting in tying back to what John Teeter's statement or what John Teeter mentioned in the past.
I see.
It's strange in the sense that given what we are seeing now within mainstream media, that we can kind of infer that Bill Gates has nefarious intentions, although proof has yet to come out that is in fact the case. Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, we can kind of see him progressing towards that possible future to where if it is in fact proven that he has something to do with the engineering and release of this pandemic so that he can benefit from it with his investment in this modern technology vaccines, then I can kind of see John Teeter's statement as a possible prediction. What if he really is behind it? And the public finds out about it? I would not be surprised if we would one day see some kind of pay-per-view event where we get to see Bill Gates being executed on live TV for the crimes that he has committed, crimes against humanity.
Wow. I've never heard of such an event like that. I've heard of the wrestling events that are pay-per-view, but that's actually something pretty interesting. You know, you've said so many things before off mic about John Teeter, and you actually know quite a bit about these theories. I think I'm going to just go ahead and ask you, but I'm going to have you answer that as soon as we get back from the break. But my question is, have you met or been in communication at some point with John Teeter? And we'll look for the answer as soon as we get back, right here on the Mr. Chris Show Underground.
To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency.
Local and state health officials are reassuring the public that there's no reason to panic.
You can trust respected medical authorities.
We are doing everything possible to combat and contain the coronavirus.
This virus is dangerous. This virus is public enemy number one.
President Trump, however, seems too incapable of acknowledging the fact that that overwhelming number of peace protesters are peaceful and are simply advocating change.
In New York City, dozens of looters seen kicking in windows and breaking into stores across Midtown Manhattan.
I'm the president and you're fake news.
It's time for the real truth, the Mr. Chris Show, Mr. Underground.
All right. Well, we've been speaking to Estas. When we left off, I had a question that I wanted to ask you because you seem to know a lot more about this than anybody else that I've ever spoken with. So, do you or have you known John Teeter?
Not that I am aware of. I have chosen to research a lot of John Teeter's postings, but that's the extent of it. As I mentioned to you, having grown up within a family that has been so heavily ingrained into the Illuminati world, I've been made aware of the existence of certain things that most people are not aware of, as far as science, technology, and so on and so forth. But I have followed the John Titor story. It just has intrigued me. But again, it's quite possible that I may have met him, although I seriously doubt him. But I don't think he would have made himself aware to me of him possibly visiting me. I just don't see the benefit of that.
But it sounds like to me, though, in any event, that you espouse the same sort of, I guess, beliefs of the way the universe and time works as he described.
Correct. That is correct. So from a scientific perspective, yes, I agree with the statements that he has made. Also, what has intrigued me is his knowledge of future events and tying them into the time that he supposedly traveled back into the United States.
Yeah, and there's the topic of the Civil War that you mentioned. Now, as I understand it, based on John Titor's timeline, we are already in the Second Civil War at this point. Is that correct, from what I understand?
From my perspective, and having researched the John Titor story for so long, yes. However, most followers or conspiracy theorists don't believe that the John Titor story was correct. They do not believe that he was who he claimed he was, because John Titor claimed that the United States would be in a civil war around the 2004-2005 time frame. It is now the year 2020, and things did not progress as he predicted. From my perspective, I think he was very cryptic in his predictions. Some of the things that he stated, or at least the way he stated them, almost sound like Nostradamus' quatrains.
Yeah, I was about to say Nostradamus.
They are vague. They are vague statements that could be interpreted as cryptic statements, cryptic predictions that, to some extent, depending on the person's point of view, can be construed to fit a particular event or set of events. But the fact that what we are seeing right now unroll across the world, and specifically in the highest areas of Western civilization, to me, leads me to believe that he wasn't really making precise predictions, but again, only being cryptic in what would eventually happen with specific events or just certain claims that typically fit what I see happening now.
But then I've spoken to people that have predicted things in the past that have kind of come pretty close, especially with the President Hillary predictions, which, I mean, obviously did not happen, but came very close in a couple of ways. And in fact, from the people I'm speaking with recently, they're saying that she's not out of the game for this coming November. So, there's still a lot of truth to these things. And civil war, who's to say we're not in some kind of a partial civil war? I mean, there's a lot of unrest in general. So couldn't you categorize that as a type of civil war? I suppose with John Teeter it was more drastic. There was like a third world, like a nuclear war tied to this, right?
Correct. Except John Teeter did mention that certain things would lead up to what could be interpreted as a real civil war. Mm-hmm. From my perspective, there are several phases that lead up to physical altercations. And I believe we are in those phases, the unseen phases, the things that happen in the background within a country before you start seeing physical altercations within the country. Mm-hmm. Right now, we see governing factions that are technically at war behind the scenes. One faction using mainstream media, using the entertainment industry, using the banking system, using every tool in the power that the Illuminati have had to manipulate the world in general, now being turned against the citizens of the country, which the Illuminati have lived in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a question that was on my mind from last time, by the way, and that was had to do with this Illuminati and the pandemic. And in my opinion, assuming this is a pandemic, it seems. Excuse me.
I wholeheartedly, not that I believe, I am telling you, it is a pandemic.
Wow. Well, okay, then here's my question. Why not stage this pandemic a little bit closer to the elections? Because at the moment, we're seeing a turnaround, a reversal. We're seeing people who aren't interested in wearing masks. We're seeing people that say, no, this is just some type of cold of some sorts, and it's not killing anybody anymore. And it seems like if this timeline that we've been in last few months, if this was set closer to November, it would have a lot more repercussions on the elections, as far as I could tell, to remove Trump. But on the other hand, what I'm seeing right now is a complete and opposite reversal, to where this pandemic has not only failed, but it's working against your Illuminati.
That has been part of the opposing faction's plan.
To fail?
If you recall, to cause the Illuminati's plans, not just to fail, but to become apparent to the world that these people do exist. As you mentioned, the pandemic appears to be failing. Part of the opposing faction's plan was to trigger the control to start rolling out their pandemic plans. If you recall, again, in our last conversation, I had mentioned that part of the Illuminati's plan was to destroy the global economy so that they can instantiate their world currency. But at the same, they have a vested interest in ensuring that the Russia collusion investigation does not produce evidence will be made public to convince the general American populace that there really is a deep state, what I refer to as Illuminati, within the United States government. Cover-up of that investigation is the early release of the pandemic. The plan was to release it closer to the election, again, to sway the votes towards the current controlling faction. But the pandemic, again, as I stated before, was released earlier in an attempt to cover up the investigation of the Russian collusion investigation.
Right. And you know, this pandemic, it's now coming to light. There's a defector, I believe, from the Wuhan lab who's going to be exposing a lot of information. But it just seems like maybe this was mistimed a little bit, because there's a lot more information coming out that this virus was alive and well and propagating towards the end of last year, and we've spoken about this before. But there's apparently a gentleman in France that they've now concluded who was France's first patient back in November of 2019, which is astounding, and that would indicate that there's probably millions of people that have already had this and didn't even know about it.
Correct, but I would like to remind you that there's also evidence of this virus starting to spread around November, October of last year in China. Mm-hmm. But I believe I have also mentioned to you in our own conversations that there are multiple strains of the current virus, each released in certain parts around the world. They're, to some extent, one and the same, but there are slight differences.
Well, that would account for, mortality rates spiking and going away, and various other factors that we've seen.
Correct. But it also accounts for the long-term spreading of all of the viruses, keeping people locked up within their own homes on a global scale for an extended period of time. Once one strain of the virus starts to spread around certain parts of the earth, people die, other people recover. Those that recover develop their antibodies. They think that they have recovered from it, but when the next strain comes in, then reinfects those people with a slightly different strain. Now, we're back into the same situation to where people are told to quarantine themselves yet again. As I mentioned to you, there were a total of 5 different strains that were released amongst the world.
Right.
So theoretically, we're talking about 5 different quarantine periods.
But now, as far as I understand, speaking with people who are well-versed in the American Constitution, from what I understand, this whole lockdown is absolutely not constitutional, and the government cannot force, whether it's state, federal, or even your local districts in the United States, cannot force you to close your business, to wear masks. That is not possible under the Constitution.
I believe you are correct.
But we're seeing it. But we're seeing it happen
here. I believe that even during the first Civil War, or let me rephrase that, during the American Civil War, there were states and cities that attempted to keep people locked up in their own homes to remain safe from being accidentally shot as a result of the North and the South fighting their wars. That did not prevent people from traveling outside of their home to work, to buy food, to feed their families, to earn a living so that they can continue supporting their families. They could not be forced to stay indoors to remain safe. And I believe it was ruled unconstitutional during the U.S., the American Civil War.
But it seems like now...
I seriously doubt that would be legal here. We just don't have, well, not that we don't have, I don't believe there is anyone willing to take the case up to the Supreme Court at this point in time.
Well, and that's another issue, the Supreme Court
of the state imposing these draconian laws.
Right, but it seems like this is being pushed more and more, and as far as I can tell, that the American people in general, unfortunately, are falling in line and agreeing with the rules that are laid down, which is really unfortunate because that means if the Constitution is not being followed, then the Constitution is at risk of being pushed to the side, to being amended entirely. And in fact, that is what my previous guest talked about around this time. This was 6-7 years ago, and it almost seems like it's coming to fruition. Yes.
Mr. Chris, I believe you just answered your own question. The fundamental difference now, between now and the United States Civil War era, you have mainstream media and the entertainment industry that continuously brainwashes your public into submission of these draconian laws or orders that are being placed amongst them.
Mm-hmm.
So mainstream media and the entertainment industry have their purpose. This I can confirm to you from my inside sources.
Well, when we get back from the break, we actually did find the audio file, and I'm going to play it for you because there's a lot to this, and I, at the time, did not really take what this gentleman was saying seriously for a lot of reasons, but things have really changed, and this year is definitely a year of change. So when we get back, we're going to play that segment, and I'm going to get your comments and see what you think and if you've ever heard of this before, because obviously some of what he said has not come to fruition regardless, but some of it has, and it's very eerie. And we'll get to that when we get back right here on the Mr. Chris Show Underground.
To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency.
Local and state health officials are reassuring the public that there's no reason to panic.
You can trust respected medical authorities.
We are doing everything possible to combat and contain the coronavirus.
This virus is dangerous. This virus is public enemy number one.
President Trump, however, seems too incapable of acknowledging the fact that that overwhelming number of peace protesters are peaceful and are simply advocating change.
In New York City, dozens of looters seen kicking in windows and breaking into stores across Midtown Manhattan.
I'm the president, and you're fake news.
It's time for the real truth, the Mr. Chris Show, Mr. Underground.
welcome back. We are speaking with none other than Mr. Estas K. Brown, who has not only told us many, many things in past shows, but this time has leveled even more information and has not failed to deliver. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to a Mr. Chris show from 2005, which was before the Katrina disaster in New Orleans. And there was a person on the show who told us about that a year ahead of time. And I'm not exactly sure how he knew, but it is very weird and it ties in with what we're talking about today. So are you still with us here, Mr. Brown?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chris.
Great. Okay. Well, then let's play the segment.
But you won't be joking, given another 13 years. Actually, it all begins in 2012.
2012. Well, we're
that's when the Aztec calendar ends. Do you know that has any significance?
Yes, we've had many guests on before.
That's when it begins. I'm in the year 2019 right now. 2019. I work for a corporation called the Vortex Corporation. Do you know what that is? Have you ever heard of that?
I don't know. Latex products?
No, Biosystems Engineering, that's what it is. Vortex Corporation, Biosystems Engineering. That was until the convenience of the Gideon Council.
Okay, and well, I don't understand this. We don't have a Gideon Council.
Of course not. That's because your Constitution hasn't been amended yet.
Okay, so you're saying that the United States of America still exists then? Am I to understand that?
Exist. In an ideal sort of way, possibly a phony, fake, what can we sell the people? What can we make them believe? Yes, if that's what you mean, yes.
So, that was recorded quite a few years ago, and listening to it now, I just can't. It's hard to believe because he's keen on things that we see today. He's talking about the government. He's talking about the sheeple. He's talking about, of course, now I've never heard of this Gideon Council. Maybe you have, but there's some weird parallels to what's going on today, don't you think?
Mr. Chris, you have heard of the Gideon Council.
Okay.
I described to you the existence of a group called the Illuminati. Except in this recording that you're presenting, it's almost taking a futuristic tone regarding the existence of the Illuminati. I can tell you, based on what I grew up in, the Illuminati has been in existence, the equivalent to this Gideon group in that recording, has been in existence for decades. They have been manipulating the United States, every country on earth, for decades. The world in which you believe we live in does not exist.
But you're describing something that is, I mean, if we look back at well, let's say the Kennedy presidency, you're saying Kennedy was part of this group?
No. I'm saying Kennedy was quite the opposite. He was aware of the existence of secret societies. As a matter of fact, he is well known for making public speeches about the dangers of falling under control or allowing these secret societies to exist. And I tell you, these secret societies have been in existence for eons. People have not been made aware of their existence. They do not want people to believe that they exist. They exist in the background, controlling and manipulating people, governments, elections. They create what they want people to believe, what they need to have done as far as elections, people getting into power. They give people the illusion of a democracy. It does not exist.
Well, this is. I have to say this is inconsistent with what every person in the United States grows up learning about. At least, I believe they still have in the school system. With civics, I believe that's class government. I mean, there's the Constitution, there's voting, there's, as far as I know, those things still exist. Like we talked about, the Constitution is coming under fire, but people vote.
Mr. Chris.
People vote.
Mr. Chris.
Yes.
Mr. Chris, the public education system in the United States, like in any other country, is a mechanism that is used, what I like to refer to as the sheepification of the masses, of the populace. People are told what they need to hear in order to accomplish the goals of this Gideon corporation, or what I grew up in as the Illuminati.
But people vote and people are elected. Are you saying that doesn't actually happen?
No, it does. But people are made to vote a certain way.
But how do you make somebody vote?
The purpose of mainstream media and the entertainment industry, to make people believe, let me rephrase that, to lead the sheeple into believing that they have freedom of choice. They do not. People vote the way they are told to vote by what they see on TV, through mainstream media, any form of entertainment that the industry currently puts forth. It is all programming.
Well, then, how do you account for the recent elections? For instance, the Trump election, which people say the country was very divided. In fact, the last several elections, I don't think there's been a landslide since before this, since I think Reagan, I believe. But
I beg to differ. Even in the Obama administration, that was a landslide victory. There have been landslide victories recently. And again, I reiterate, that is only because the entertainment industry, the mainstream media, they all participate into the manipulation of people's minds into voting the way they need them to vote.
But then there are people who are voting against, for instance, people that voted against Obama. So
correct. So we are talking about the current administration. The current administration is part of the opposing faction that is fighting against the establishment, Illuminati, that are leading the country into a one-world government. This opposing faction has learned the tricks of the trade across the decades. I guess you can say they have been planning for this moment. And they are well aware of the tricks that have been used in the past, and they have employed them themselves. And again, what we are seeing are the silent phases of the United States' second Civil War.
But now, when Trump was elected, of course, it surprised, well, the mainstream media, for sure, and a lot of other people. I was actually out of the country, at the time and heard about it the next morning, I had assumed as well that Trump had no chance to win. At least that's what all the polls were reporting. That's what everybody was saying, which is, the outcome was quite the opposite. So, I mean, how do they let that happen? Your organization is so tied in very well. How did it slip by?
Very clever manipulation of people's minds. They took advantage of the sleeping majority of the country. They said the right things, all of the right things that it took to wake up people.
From what I understand, coming up to this election, that there's an even larger silent majority. And what we've been seeing in the news recently, I believe, at least since I'm still an American, I've never renounced that, even though I live abroad. It's building an ire in people to where they are going to find the release not through violence, but through voting this fall. At least that's what I feel.
That remains to be seen, Mr. Chris. I have very little hope that would come to fruition.
Well, the rate things are going with calamities, exchanges, worldwide issues, economic disasters that are pending. The mind spoke of 2012, but, maybe they got it wrong by a few years, or we got it wrong on our interpretation, because it seems like this year is a make or break for everything. From what you're saying and from what I've observed, pretty much this is the final stages of what's going to decide the next years or decades for not the United States, but the world.
And I agree with you. What we are currently witnessing is the possible awakening of not just the sleeping majority within the United States, but also the world. Keep in mind that the Illuminati is a global system of control centered around the United States. If the existence of the Illuminati is proven within the United States, it's going to trickle down into every other country on Earth, thereby destroying the plans of the United Nations to instantiate a one-world government. But again, that hinges on truth coming to light. And so far, I don't see much of it coming out to light, which falls in line with what the Illuminati have planned. There have been plans and counter plans to counter each other, each other's strategies that have been planned for quite some time.
So looking forward, what is the playbook for the fall? What can you tell us something that you know or heard?
Yes. So regarding the election, currently there are two candidates.
Right. Joe Biden.
Obviously, President Trump.
Right.
His current administration, and former Vice President Joe Biden.
Which is leading in the polls, from what I understand.
Which are obviously fake. I'm telling you, having inside information, those are false polls. Again, created to lead people to believe that President Trump doesn't stand a chance. And again, trying to trick people into voting for the leading candidate in the polls.
Right.
But the plan
because he's going to have a running mate.
I'm sorry?
He's going to have a running mate.
Yes, but it doesn't. The running mate doesn't really matter. The actual candidate, if you have not heard, the Democrat National Committee has not committed to endorsing Joe Biden just yet as the official DNC candidate. And that's the case for a reason. What is going to be coming very shortly is Joe Biden's removal as the leading candidate. And guess who is going to slide in into his run for presidency? None other than Hillary Clinton.
To replace not as a running mate.
No. As the official Democratic National Committee candidate. Now, it's my understanding that the plan is to have Joe Biden removed by using the mainstream media to focus on the crimes that he's actually committed. I just find it rather amusing that President Trump has been accused of abusing his power by obligating the Ukrainian government to help frame Democratic Party members, with his declassified call script with the Ukrainian president.
But
when
you
in fact
think
there is actual evidence of Joe Biden forcing the former Ukrainian president to fire the former Ukrainian Attorney General.
But do you think that Hillary Clinton is that powerful and aggressive to do that?
Yes, she is. She is very powerful within the ranks of the Illuminati. So powerful that she has, to some extent, coerced them into agreeing to supporting her as the candidate to lead the United States into the one world government.
That is also something that was predicted?
Yes, as a matter of fact, John Teeter did make some statements. He did not specifically mention Hillary Clinton, but an era that would signify essentially the start of a physical civil war would be the results of an election between a he and a she.
Interesting. And is that also like the Third World War or not?
No, we're talking about the United States Civil War. Mr. Chris, I'm going to have to cut this interview short. I'm running into a situation here, but I would really like to talk about.
Yes. Yes. Mr. Brown? Mr. Brown? Okay. Well, it looks like, unfortunately, we lost Mr. Brown again, and hopefully we can get a hold of him at some point in the future and continue our discussions. I've never actually come across a person who has this amount of information. It's, like I said before, something that would take probably hundreds of hours to completely go through just a little bit of what he knows and could disclose. But I hope we can talk to him again right here on the Mr. Chris Show Underground.